Okay, so welcome everybody to our second panel event. This is the innovation panel, and I, Katie Wray, the lead educator on this programme, am joined by Charlie Wainwright and Mike Addison.
Hello.
Hi there. You'll have met Charlie through the discovery questionnaire as part of the platform. But I would like to ask, first of all, Charlie to give a brief introduction as to why we would have invited him here to be part of an innovation panel, and then to ask Mike the same. So, Charlie.
Right, thank you, Katie. Well, for 25 years, I worked for Procter & Gamble, a leading global company in consumer goods. But what's more appropriate is the last 7 years where I've worked with Young Enterprise in a coaching and mentoring role. And it was from doing that coaching and mentoring that I authored or originated the Discovery Tool, which I hope everyone has found really helpful.
They absolutely have, so thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Mike.
And the reason I'm here, Katie, is I guess I'm an innovation enthusiast. I did 31 years at Procter & Gamble within R&D. Never knew Charlie when we were there together. But in that time, I helped innovation in P&G in a whole variety of roles. And then after retirement, I've done a couple of years helping local businesses innovate and grow.
Great. So we asked for your questions through the platform and also on Twitter. And thanks again for all of the questions that you offered to us. I've only been able to choose a few of those questions. And actually what I've done quite often is choose themes and bring together a few people's questions into one so that we can answer as many as possible. The first section is going to be a little bit about Charlie and Mike and their views and some of the bits about their background, then a little bit of advice for you, and then moving into thinking about idea development and some of the areas that they might be able to help you with those questions related there. But I'm going to kick off and I'm going to ask Mike this first question, and it comes from John Cullen within the platform. So Mike, tell us, what was your best innovation failure, i.e. the one you learned the most from?
I guess it's difficult to choose one. I mean, there were so many. I guess, bearing in mind the audience today, the best example is a thing called Hot Seat, which was the one innovative idea I had that I actually tried to develop on my own outside of P&G, and learned a huge amount about just bringing an idea together and how you move from idea to opportunity to business. We never got into market with it. But I guess the big learning in that whole development for me was that in addition to all the business questions you challenge yourself with and you learn from, there's another bigger question, and that is, what do you want from this proposition for yourself? And at that stage in my career, I was in my mid-40s, I had a family, mortgage, children, the work. It just wasn't the right time for me to go out and start my own business. And thankfully, I made the decision to stay with P&G, and looking back, it was absolutely the right decision. So that's probably the biggest personal learning I took, but not in developments I was involved in when P&G, we failed because we underestimated the competition. And automatic dishwashing business I was involved in. I worked on another business that was another product that was looking to expand or develop a technology that P&G owned, and that taught me, technology is the wrong focus for any business. The focus needs to be on the consumer, on the benefit. With what the technology is.
Good advice bundled into there as well, and certainly something that you're all interested in the enterprise shed is the idea of failure, and we will be coming back to that as part of this panel. So to both of you, so we'll start off with Charlie, and this question comes from Lukman Adetunja. What can you say is the special difference between you and any other employee at Procter & Gamble? Thanks for that question.
That's quite a question. I think the best way to answer that is it was probably said during my time at P&G that I was not, if you like, of a typical P&G profile. Even though I was there for 25 years. But in 1999, I entered a business that was a whole business rather than a global business of which one can be involved in part. And I think it's fair to say that's probably where I found myself, in as much that I found that I could manage and look after and, dare I say, control a UK business, which subsequently became a European business. And that responsibility was really enjoyable because for the first time I was responsible for the bottom line of a business. So it was really running a business within a business. And what was even more attractive in some ways was that you knew you were running that business within a very powerful corporation, which could act as a safety net if you ever made a disastrous decision.
Some really good advice within there as well, and something that we've been exploring within the shed. How do you start a business from within a business, but also how do you use the things that you're good at and the things that you want to do to be able to find something that you're comfortable with? So this control and smaller business focused environment worked much better for you than the huge corporate environment.
Yes, it did, and I think if there are people out there now who are working within a corporation, if they get often what happens is people stay within the mainstream business because they think that's what they should do. I actually stepped out of the mainstream P&G business and went into a small business that had no profile at all. But in terms of actually running a business, it taught me a huge amount and helped me in later life as well.
Great. How about you, Mike?
I hate to say I was special in any particular way. I guess what makes anybody special, though, is their life experience. And in that sense, mine was unique, as anybody's life is. In P&G, what I did was basically I had 3 careers, although working in the same company in R&D for the whole time. In the first 17 years, I was an innovator. My job was to help develop new products for P&G, help improve the products we had, managing that at different levels in the company as your career progressed. But then after 17 years, I was basically moved into a corporate R&D role where I spent 3 years actually evaluating other people's ideas with a view to looking at internal funding and providing internal support to what we thought were the best of those ideas. And after 3 years of doing that, I then moved into a whole new strategy for Procter & Gamble, which was called Open Innovation. And that took me into evaluating and helping external companies bring their ideas in an appropriate form to P&G. So I feel I've had this fantastic career that covered those 3 very different aspects of innovation, and I say seeing innovation from different angles.
That's right. It keeps your interest as well in trying to explore those different things.
Katie, can I make just one other point based on what Mike said there, and that is that what I think Procter & Gamble did very well was it valued diversity. And yes, there were people who could be within the P&G profile, but they were a great group of people with a lot of different skills. And I think that's important to the people listening today if they're looking to start their own business, that success will come from them ultimately building a team of diverse people in terms of styles and qualities and knowledge and skills.
Surround yourself by people that are better than you is quite a good thing to reflect.
Yes, but make sure you have one key skill which the other people don't have, so you still add value.
We're going to come back to skills shortly. I'll stick with you, Mike, for this one. What percentage of your ideas created actual products, and how successful were they?
No real idea how to answer that, other than to say it's kind of, at least in a big company, it's very difficult to assign individuals to specific ideas. I mean, in P&G, there are a few people that we would call serial innovators. I wasn't one of them. They are typically on what's called our technical career track. I was on the managerial career track. So in a sense, my job was to help innovation move along. Now within that, definitely I had ideas that were built upon and developed by the team in general. If I was to answer it specifically, I had one specific idea to resolve a problem by putting an ingredient into a product that we didn't use in that way, and that worked, and it went to market, etc. But as I say, I think even for entrepreneurs or small companies, ideas develop through collaboration. And if you're too precious about your idea, it's probably the wrong thing. You know, that's not to say don't be a strong leader, a strong driver of your ideas, but you've got to be able to absorb and incorporate into them other people's ideas. And you've also got to be able to encourage your idea to go out so that other people want to participate in it. And certainly when I was involved in open innovation at P&G, there was nothing worse than meeting people who would say, I've got a really great idea, but I can't tell you about it. And it's like, fine. Why are you here?
And Charlie, have you got some statistics to add to that as well?
Well, there's one set of statistics. You mean in terms of success?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically taken from venture capital information, which is effective for those who don't understand venture capital. It's basically investors who invest in startup companies. And if you just take the sum of 10 organizations, basically the way it works is that they would say that 40% of those startups fail. Probably another 40% of what they would describe as the living dead, in as much they're chugging along, but perhaps they're not going to realize their potential. And only 20%, or 2 out of 10, of the companies that they have elected to back become what they would regard as stars. Now, I don't want to put people off, but if you then consider that for probably every 100 propositions that that kind of investment company receive, they probably only invest in between 5 and 7%. And of those 5 and 7%, only a fifth are real stars. But if I can just touch on one quick point, follow on in Mike, I am a huge believer in collaboration and partnership at an early stage. And a mantra that I have is that if you're a sole founder and you're struggling to make your company grow, 100% of very little is very little.
That's right.
Okay, and obviously the next stage is that if you 100% of something, or sort of 80% of something is much more valuable. So don't be frightened to look at collaboration and partnership even at an early stage, but be very cautious about how much of your company you elect to give away and under what circumstances.
And that links back into what Mike was saying as well about people that have ideas but they don't want to share them with others. You're not going to be able to collaborate with other people if you're not sharing and dealing with your ideas. So thank you very much to Anthony Shields for that question about the success of the products. Something very specific to both of you as individuals, and thank you to Anne Lane for this question. What made you both decide to provide coaching and become mentors? Mike, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just literally a natural progression through the career I talked about earlier. What I found happening was I moved from doing innovation myself to then evaluating other people's innovation inside the company, and that led to coaching on how to make their ideas more likely to succeed. And then that moved on to I was doing exactly the same outside the company. And then after, in retirement, I was offered, because of what I did in P&G, I was offered a role helping local businesses do the same. And now at the closure of that, it's like, well, I love doing this, so how do I just keep doing it?
We hear a lot that it's about giving back and it's about being able to maintain the interests that you have and work. I also hear a lot from people that are working with students that want to be mentors and coaches that actually you spend very little of your time with a group of such intelligent, bright people, and it's really nice to spend some time with them. What about you, Charlie?
Well, I started off by sports coaching. Few years ago now, and I started off with a bunch of kids who were actually 8 years old, and for 10 years then took them through every age group in this particular sport, which was rugby. And I found that I actually got, despite my maturity in years, I actually got on very well with young people. And then more latterly, in terms of the opportunity to take the sort of business knowledge and skills and try and help those young people start their businesses, has been really rewarding, because I've met some incredibly bright people. I've met some people who are so motivated, who they're getting, for example, a first-class honours degree and still starting the early stages of their business. And I also find those younger people are more accepting of an opinion. So rather than tell them what I think they should do, I would perhaps pose a question of them or perhaps make an observation and then let them go away and think about it and come back and decide what they want to do. But it's great. It's very, very rewarding.
So we'll move on to some advice-based questions, and I want to try and take a few of these as kind of quick fire responses. So the first one, which I'll ask Charlie, which comes from Richard Fawcett. Of all the many facets of successful entrepreneurship, what are the most important factors you've identified in people that lead to a good outcome?
People. Well, they are fundamental, because you can have a great individual with not such a great idea that doesn't work, but at some point that individual may well come up with the right idea. I think they have to be motivated, hardworking, and persistence is absolutely key. Don't get ground down by roadblocks and obstructions, because you will come across them. I also think that back to this collaboration idea, and as much that sole founders of a business idea very quickly, I think, will find that they do need partners in their business, people who can come in and complement their skills. But I think what stands out for me mostly in terms of people kicking off their own business is that they have to be comfortable, and I won't discuss the degree, but they have to be comfortable with risk, because they are going to take risk. But most importantly, produce or create a product that your target market needs, rather than create a product in your own mind's eye. Right. I've seen that a few times, and those products have failed. And the business owner has been absolutely astonished that it's failed, because surely people are going to want this product. No, because you haven't done it the way that they want it.
Well, we will be coming back to that as well. There are themes running through this.
Can I just add, I think that's absolutely critical. The one thing I'd say I see in successful entrepreneurs is clarity of thought.
Right.
They really think the thing through. I mean, the reality is it isn't about luck, and it isn't about faith. It's about being able to do something for other people that adds value to their lives. Right. And they see what that value is with a clarity and the action steps they need to take to make that work that others don't. Others have woolly ideas that they never clarify to the degree. They're also extremely confident, because otherwise you just don't get started. And they've got high energy and a bias for action. Lots of people have the clarity of thought, but they never get out of their chairs and make the thing happen. These people do both.
Which I think leads on to my next question. I'll stick with you for that, Mike. This question comes from Tina Thompson. If people think your idea is too big, perhaps you're trying to solve a really huge problem globally, how do you motivate yourself to prove them wrong?
I think it comes back to this clarity of thought by taking the huge and converting it to bite-sized chunks. Because unless you can do that, frankly, your idea is nothing other than an idea. The people who make the big differences in the world find a way to make the thing happen. So the way you motivate yourself, I would say, is you take this grandiose vision, because maybe that's what it is. It's a vision rather than an idea per se.
That's right.
But then you challenge yourself to, what can I do today that will move me closer to delivering that? And be incredibly hard on yourself with exactly what am I going to do, and then do it. Don't just keep planning and planning and planning, but just do things bite-sized chunks and have confidence that at the end of each day you can say, I've made progress. Then you're succeeding.
Yeah, I think there's also something in there that you haven't got the bite-sized chunks small enough if you haven't done it.
Exactly.
Because it still feels too big and too much of a challenge.
Exactly.
So it could even be about buying a bus ticket to be able to go to see the person.
Exactly.
It could be a tiny, very
absolutely,
next step.
Absolutely. And believing in this incrementalism will get me there. Yeah. And some days you'll be down, but as long as you've got a tomorrow that's going to take you to an up, and there's a gentle gradient upwards, you're making a difference. You're getting there.
Yeah, and I think it's, if you quantify that, it's like, depending on what your product concept is, I've I've attracted my first 1,000 users. Now my next step is not to go to 10,000 or 100,000, is to go to 2,000, then 5,000, then 10,000. Because what that will then enable you to do is to start, and if that's done over a relatively short period of time, that will enable you to maybe go to a venture capitalist or someone like that and say, I have got early traction. I started with 1,000 users. In 6 months, I've driven it to 10,000 users. Now, believe in my idea, and if you are an investor, back me.
So a very quick answer to this question, if you have one, please, Mike. How do you start a business if you have no money?
The first thing I would say is the start of any business is developing the ideas, the planning, the validating your plans. And the more you can do of that without money, that's the better off you're going to be, because eventually you will need money and you'll have to convince somebody to give you money if you don't already have it. So the more you can, the more you've got a strong proposition, the more likely they are to attract funds. Typically, the best way to go is to look for other people's money if you don't have your own. Grants from governments or local councils or whatever would be ideal. Failing that, family and friends. Failing that, there tends to be competitions in the whole innovation space, depending on where you are in the world. And increasingly crowdfunding is coming into play. So I would argue if you've got a really good idea and you've done the homework to validate it, you'll find the money. Don't worry, the money will come to you.
Yeah. So thank you to Mary-Ann Amiwere for that question. And actually in your response, Mike, we've also answered Karen Pringle's question, which was an interesting one about what's the best way to gain funding for an idea after doing research that means you know it's a good idea. And I think what we've heard Mike say there is that if you have validated your idea and it really is validated and a good idea, you will be able to find and access the money through incremental different measures. There was something that we talked about in a previous discussion that I just wanted to draw in, and Mike, perhaps you could reflect on this, that perhaps money is put into businesses too early.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. I think the right way to approach business is to be extremely frugal. In P&G, we used to use a phrase, spend a little, learn a lot. The first job of business, before in a sense you become a business, is to learn whether your idea or opportunity is suitable to be a business. And you want to do that with as little money sloshing around as possible. The reason for that is that money distorts the learning. If I've given you money, Katie, to start your business, then I haven't done that by and large in a great altruism. I want a return. And when you stop showing me that you're likely to generate a return, I start to put pressure on you and get upset, whatever. And it may be that the business isn't yet at that stage. You're still at the moving from an idea to an opportunity, or from an opportunity to is it a business. So I think I would say to people who are starting out with their ideas, for me, the critical thing is to get to what I would call this venture proposition, which is basically to be able to answer a few questions. And the questions are, I've got a product or a service concept. I can vocalize it. I can, in 2 minutes, get across to my grandmother what this means. And if you can't, your idea needs to keep being worked on. But once you've said that, you've then got to challenge, is it viable? Can I make that a reality? What would that product or service actually require in terms of functions to make it work? And then you drop down a further stage. Now I know the functions, so what are the technologies that are going to make that happen? So you're looking just in thought, not in action. You're not building anything at this stage. You're just putting together a plan of why I think that idea I've got, that product concept, is viable. Then you've also got to work up and you've got to say, but who cares? Who is it important for? What's the market? How big a problem is this product solving for people? And if there is no problem you're solving, then you don't have an idea of any great value, at least at this point in time. And when you know that, so now you've got it's desirable, it's viable, the next question is, can I scale it and create and get a living from it? And that comes from the business model thinking. And you need to have kind of snapshot of each of those things, in my view, to know your idea is now an opportunity.
And we have provided frameworks. Charlie's provided his discovery questionnaire, and we do come on to the business model canvas within the enterprise shed as well. So do ask myself within the platform, and also our other educators and mentors, if you are struggling with any of those frameworks and how you could use them a little bit further. So thank you for that,
and actually,
Mike.
Mike has actually articulated the is it real
That's
section
right.
of the discovery.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was hearing.
Without, I hasten to add, any notes in front of him.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Mike.
So, and Mike actually hasn't been involved in the development of the discovery questionnaire, but has validated it just there, because
So
the questions that you see are the ones that Mike has. We probably should have chatted about this beforehand. Okay, so moving on, and I've got 3 people who I've combined this into one question. So thank you to Barnaby Norman, Mariam Ganji, and George Prokopakis for this question. And there are 2 parts to it, but I think they go together. And Charlie, I'll ask you this one. What is more important, gut feeling or research? And is scratch your own itch good advice?
I think Mike and I can both testify, having had originally our background in a big corporation, that a big corporation will analyse to the nth degree and can get what is commonly called analysis paralysis. I think I have met entrepreneurs who have relied too much or too heavily on their instinct. So my answer is actually that it's a combination of fact and feel. So when one is initially undertaking market research, I would always, for example, start with what I call qualitative market research, and that is that I would get opinions of people. And if I had sufficient opinion there that the idea was a smart one, then I would start to get the numbers that Mike talked about earlier in terms of quantifying the size of the market, the opportunity, is it scalable, and so on and so forth. I have seen a number of entrepreneurs who say, instinctively, I know this is right, and fail. So put simplistically, then understand your customer need and the size of the opportunity and match fact with instinct. But don't ignore facts and data.
Can I just add, Katie, I mean, an analogy I love to use, because I think it's so relevant as a father, is your idea is like your child, right? They look beautiful and they'll never look anything else. You need to take other people's opinions into account as well. So your gut feel, it can be misleading. It's really important you obviously have a belief in your product, but you can't let that blind you to the research that's coming in. If the research keeps telling you your baby isn't as beautiful as you think, start to worry.
Okay.
You might have an ugly baby.
You might have an ugly baby.
Thank you. There's a lot of people within the enterprise shed thinking about social enterprise. So Charlie, I want to come to you with this question. And it comes from Vera Almeida, but also I've attached a part, and I wanted to include this because it comes from Josiane Jock, who you've met through a case study with her business, French for All. So hello there, Josiane, and thank you very much for your question. The question is, what main differences should be taken into account when planning a business or a social enterprise? And if you're starting a social enterprise, how do you get support from policymakers?
That's a good question, actually. I don't think there is necessarily a fundamental difference in the approach. If you are starting a limited company to create, if you like, a physical product, like water, for example, then the idea is that it's scalable, there are sufficient people who will buy it at the price you want it to buy at, and you can make money out of it, and then you would potentially reinvest that money in expanding the company by bringing out an extension to that product line, etc., etc. Or if you're a PLC, you'll reward investors with dividends. With a social enterprise, then surely the same principle is the same, in as much that the more powerful I can make the argument, and if it is a money-raising exercise, then I reinvest that back into the business. Furthermore, with a social enterprise, is that if I can show that I am doing something well, meeting a need, generating interest, and generating revenues from that, then maybe governments or other organizations will look at me and say, this individual can add value, and therefore will work with me.
Can add value and also has some resource to put into helping us to do that. So I think that idea about creating a surplus and creating some revenue and then going to policymakers with that offer is one way of being able to attract them.
I've met some youngsters who've said that, oh, it's going to be a social enterprise, I don't want to make money.
Yeah.
And I've said, well, you do want to make money.
How will you have impact?
Yes, you don't want to exploit people, but you want to make money so you can reinvest it back into your concept and make it bigger and better and with greater reach. Yeah. Sorry, Mike.
The other thing I was going to add was on the second part of the question about the policymakers. What you have to understand is that their role is maybe absolutely critical to whether your business works or not. And therefore, in a sense, they become your customers at an earlier stage, if you want, to the business. So the business model and the business has to speak to what the policymakers need to happen, not necessarily what is going to actually happen in the field, or it needs to be expanded to cover whatever the policymakers are basically their agenda. The idea needs to speak directly to the policymakers in addition to what you're essentially trying, or at the end of the day, trying to do in the field.
And there might be something in that for this next question, so I'll stick with you, Mike. And this next question comes from Doug Bell and Paul Charlton, so thanks for those questions. It's about breaking into large industries. So how difficult is it to interest large companies to look at your idea?
Yeah, I mean, I would say now it's never been easier, is the first point I'd make. I mean, many large companies are embarked on what's called open innovation. And basically what that is the companies recognising they're not going to grow simply relying on internal resources, so seeking to go to the outside world and broaden their reach of potential innovation to people outside the company. So typically you'd be able on their website to find places within large companies to make an initial contact. However, based on my experience, and I was involved for 10 years in doing this in P&G, it isn't easy to end up with a deal. It'll never be easy. Let's face it, it'll never be easier. It'll never be easy, but in some industries, it's probably easier than others. So the toy industry, as I understand it, they are frequently going through loads of ideas, and toys are amenable for early stage development by individuals and like. So there, the chances are probably higher than if you're looking to develop a top range medical device, where your chances almost nil. The thing to understand is what the company may be saying is, we want your ideas. They don't. What they want is ideas that have been proven to work in the market. That's what they really want.
The same as the policymakers.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And basically what that does is it de-risks the innovation journey for the big company, and they will pay very well for that because they know that's worth a lot of money. So the more what your chances of getting into a big company are going to be higher the further you've gone on that journey from idea to opportunity to business. If people are thinking all I need is to file a patent and then deal on the patent, it can happen, but it's about the same chances of winning the lottery. So you need to be aware of that. There's a really good book which I'd recommend called One Simple Idea by Stephen Kay, and its subtitle is "Turn Your Dreams into a Licensing Goldmine While Letting Others Do the Work." Stephen Kay's an American. Some elements of it are fairly US centric, but he's a guy who basically makes his money by coming up with ideas and selling them on. So if you're interested in that approach, that book's a good place to start.
Okay, moving back into some quick fire so that we can try and get as many of these questions in. This is an interesting question, and perhaps in one sentence you might be able to both give some feedback on this one. It comes from Radha Krishnasamy, so thank you for that question. If you have considered your market opportunities and you've done all of the required background research and you conclude that your business idea is viable and you go ahead and start the business venture, what factors would still cause the business to fail?
There's loads. Unfortunately, there's
I'm
loads.
not sure there's a quick answer to that. Usually the biggest downfall that in a startup company is cash flow, in as much that even if you only have a small amount of money or you have an investor, then cash flow, the business plan doesn't generate the sales as quickly as one anticipates, and a company runs out of cash. That's one example.
Okay.
Your research could be flawed. Never forget that. There's never an infallible research package. You could execute what you're trying to do badly. You just make a mistake. We want to produce the detergent that was meant to be free flowing and it caked in the box, sort of thing. So, and that's going to kill it. Lots of external factors which you can't control but are constantly changing. So government action, regulations, environmental factors, they might play. They can often also support a development, but they can also work against you. And biggest of all, your competition. And there will always be competition. What do they do?
I think the conclusion of that is that your research is never finished for you to start doing the business. Okay, so a question from Andre Mafuta. When an idea fails, do you let it go or do you try again? Mike?
I think the way to think about that is identify why you failed. So what is the killer issue? And that's a phrase which many people use. What's the killer issue in your plan? And if you've got an idea how to resolve that killer issue, you keep going. If you've got no idea how to resolve that killer issue, you stop. And stop might mean backburnering the idea, because you might at some time in the future have an idea how to overcome it, or things will happen in the environment which will no longer mean that's the killer issue. But that would be the criteria I would identify the killer issue.
And you're wasting some time if you're not first addressing the killer question.
Absolutely. Don't do the easy things in business. When you're doing it for yourself, focus on the things which are the toughest things, because that's the way you'll quickest get to the right end point.
So Charlie, what do you think? What's better, a great business plan or a great idea?
Well, the great idea comes first, and then back to reinforcing the points we've been making in terms of validating that idea. Because the business plan is a kind of means to an end, because the business plan fundamentally, includes all your market research, includes your competitive environment, includes crucially your business model, which incidentally is not marketing. It is the model in terms of how you enter the markets that you've identified. So idea, and then the business plan is, as I say, is a vehicle to get a successful delivery.
And actually, within the Enterprise Shed and within a lot of things that we do here at Newcastle University, we're moving away a little bit from the notion of the business plan and focusing much more on the business model. So, Mike, is there something you want to say about the business model?
I would argue even better than the idea, even better than the business plan is a validated business model canvas, which I think you've talked about on the course. I mean, for me, that is at the heart of what needs to be. It's at the heart of the learning process you're going through. Business plan is too much simply speculation. What you need is to be able to focus on validating those speculations, making them much more predictive of the reality. That's what the business model canvas focuses you on.
Okay, so thanks to Carl Hannay for that. I'm going to jump a couple of questions that we've got here, because unfortunately we're going to run out of time if I don't. And something that I'm really interested in, and I saw quite a lot of questions about this, and the two that I have here come from Thomas Memory and Gerard Crowley. Is marketing and promotion more important than innovation, creativity and design? And therefore, can relentless marketing guarantee the success of any idea? Charlie?
Well, if I handle the second question first, in terms of can relentless marketing guarantee a success or return, in a word, rarely. I can't remember how many years ago was it. It may still be relevant to the audience, but Coca-Cola decided to introduce a new spring water product. And then somebody, I think it was called Dasani or something of that nature, and then it became apparent that this natural spring water was actually out of a big industrial tap on an industrial estate somewhere. So it didn't really matter how much marketing Coke put behind that. It was doomed to failure. And in fact, it got withdrawn from the marketplace. And I think that's a pretty good example of where a company thinks it can override consumer opinion with marketing. I think that's rarely the case.
Okay. Mike, any views on that?
I think you've got to address a consumer need. And if you don't address a consumer need, no amount of marketing, promotion or whatever will lead to lasting success.
There's quite a lot of questions coming in as well about how you actually do the market research. One that I have here from Mark Rosser is about what questions have you found to be most valuable when you're doing the market research? Any insights to that?
Yeah, I think it obviously depends at what stage you're at in the business development. But in the early stages, the big advice I would give to people is don't talk about your idea. Talk about the problem that your idea is seeking to address, and find out what people do with that problem. So is it important to them? How much money do they spend in resolving it? How do they resolve it? And you back at the ranch reinterpret that as to, is this all saying my product's going to be a success? If you go and tell them about your product, but like showing them a picture of your baby, then the natural response for most people is, oh, that's lovely. And it's nonsense, because they're not being asked to invest anything in it. And that carries through later in the product development. Once you've got the product or prototypes, the ideal way to get feedback isn't to just give it to them and find out what they think. It's to get them to invest in it. So buy it from you. Do something that shows they want it. Even if it's sign up if you want to try this product for us. Something that shows they're caring about it, because that's eventually what will happen in the marketplace. Again, another book recommendation, The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, How to Talk to Consumers. It's really excellent. I would argue P&G could have learned a lot from having read that book.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, thank you. And our final question, I'll come to Charlie for this one. Thank you to Chinyelugo Ukwu and Deborah Gorey for this question. How do you find a team to work with now that you know you want to go ahead with your idea, or is it okay to run with your idea until you meet the right people along the way?
I think the people that you elect to work with directly are absolutely fundamental to your success. We've talked earlier about collaboration and partnership. A sole founder, I think, will drive an idea only so far before they will recognize the need to have other people involved in their business. Sometimes those will be external people that they can kind of buy in and buy out of, but there will come a time when they will want to start to build, albeit a small team. The way to do that, in my view, is to network. It's not always necessarily the easiest or most natural thing to do, but do recognize that when you walk into a networking environment, everybody is like-minded.
That's right.
As opposed to, say, walking into a party where you don't know people. Everyone is in that networking room because they want to meet other people and find out if they can get collaborative work or partnerships. So I think networking is absolutely fundamental. And my big hobby horse, if you like, for want of another word, is that when you find those people and you are short of cash, then the natural inclination is to say, become part of my business. Let me offer you some equity. My message is very simple there. Be very, very cautious in terms of how you offer that equity. And if you are going equity as in a share of your business, and do it in bite-sized chunks. So if, for example, it was appropriate to invite you into my company because you could be a great chief technology officer, then I might ultimately want to give you 10% of my company. But I would probably release it.
I need to earn that.
You've got to earn it. So, and some of that earning could be in terms of your personal contribution, but ultimately it could be the stage of the development of the company. So you might be doing a great job, but we haven't yet hit that magic, for example, £1 million turnover. So you don't earn your final tranche of equity. But I've seen it many times where young entrepreneurs have said, gosh, I must have Mike Addison in my business because I need him for the next 12 months. They give too much away, and perhaps, nothing personal, Mike, in 12 months' time might not be adding the value that he did initially.
That's right.
But the company's made progress, and he's relatively expensive to get rid of. So be cautious, and if you're going to give anything away, back in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah. So something I want to add to that, and the theme of networking, is to wait until the right people come along. You know, just because you put into a room doesn't mean you have to choose one of those people. So wait until the right people come along. Any closing remarks from you, Mike?
Well, I'd just say on that topic is be really clear what you need the people to do. Because if there's nothing worse than investing time and resource when nothing valuable emerges from it.
Yeah, great. Any closing remarks, Charlie?
Yeah, I think that if you believe you really have a smart business idea, you will meet barriers. You'll have a few mountains to climb and so on and so forth. But back to Mike's point, which I think is so important, is make sure you're doing the right thing. Validate, validate, validate. And if you can validate that idea, then keep at it and try and enroll the right people, be they coaches, mentors, or people who can work day to day with you to drive that through. And don't lose heart.
Yeah, my closing thoughts would be, you're probably going to fail. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. But it's also what makes us human. If people aren't driving ideas, we aren't moving forward.
That's right.
Progress is all about ideas. So kind of expect to fail, but don't let it put you off.
Yeah, great. Great, so we've run out of time, unfortunately. I could go on talking to these guys for ages. I'm really interested in the insights that they have from their experience. And I look forward to hearing what you think of this video and to talking to you more about some of the themes that we've brought up. So thank you very much to Charlie and thank you very much to Mike.
Absolute
okay,
pleasure.
Goodbye.